Good evening, everyone. My name is Jerry Schaffenberger, Mayor Schaffenberger, as many of you know me as. Thank you for coming out to the first Economic Development Town Hall. And the way we have the format structured is I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of the Economic Development Committee that was recently formed, how it all came about, who the members are. I think what I'll do is first introduce the members up here. Not everyone's here, but I will let you know who's not, because there's a few folks who couldn't make it for scheduling. But to my left I have Tony Mercantante, our Township Administrator, Pete Wilkins, Kevin Colangelo, and Pat Chenard. And missing are Richard Saker and Harold Nolan. Harold Nolan has the flimsy excuse I have ever heard of. He's in China. So, we let him off the hook this time. And Rich Saker has some family emergency, so he sends his regrets, but we should have a good night anyway. The way this all came about, the Economic Development Committee was something that the Township Committee had formed about a year ago. And we thought we really wanted to have a concerted effort to bring businesses and expand the commercial tax rateable base in Middletown. And one of the best ways to do that is to get some of the great minds that we have in town, some of the great business minds, together. So we formed the committee, and we got a great outpouring of requests to be on it. And you're looking right now at the cream of the crop here. So we tried to get a really good cross-section of everybody, every type of business owner in town. So we have folks who work for small businesses, large commercial property owners, larger business owners, global folks like Harold Nolan. So everybody really brings a different perspective to the Economic Development Committee. And we've been working on several initiatives over the years, and over the past year, I should say. And myself and Tony Fiore is also on the committee. We're sort of the liaisons. And I want to point out the Township Committee folks who are here. Tony Fiore, if you raise your hand. Deputy Mayor Stephanie Murray. And Kevin Senabrino is on his way. He has a meeting tonight, and I think Steve Massell will be here eventually. So the whole Township Committee should be here. I also want to point out Jason Greenspan, our Township Planner, and Jim Van Ness. Oh, there you go. Keep moving around on me. Holy cow. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tony in a minute, and we're going to go over some of the sites and some of the businesses. But one of the things that we tried to do here locally is try and sync up with the efforts of the state. As many of you know, I also work for the Department of State, and we're charged with bringing business into New Jersey. So that's going to filter down to the local municipalities here. And we've had a lot of great success partnering up with the Department of State with some of their incentives in bringing businesses in here. Many of you have heard about Sloan Kettering coming in. That is one of the big success stories so far for Middletown this year. And they recently closed on the property. So they're about, I guess, Tony, what are they, about 2 years away from actually occupying the building? And this is a huge win for us because the building that they're coming into, many of you know it as a former Lucent property. It's at exit 114. So when you get off coming south and you come to that light, if you look directly ahead, there's a big, very large building that's in sort of a wooded area. And that's the old Lucent property that's been vacant for about 8 years. Now what happens is when a property like that stays vacant, inevitably there are commercial tax appeals. And that really hurts the town because when they're not assessed the same way residences are. If all your kids move out of your house, it doesn't matter. It's still assessed at the same value. But when a commercial property is not occupied to 100% or vacant, it's not generating revenue for the owners. So they can come in and they will be successful with a tax appeal. And we've gotten hit with a few of them. So to have a property that's been vacant all of those years, all of a sudden become occupied is huge for the town. It's a huge win. So that's one of the projects we're really excited about. The Township Administrator, certainly the Township Attorney, had to put a lot of work into working out a very complicated agreement, a tax agreement. They're a tax-exempt organization, so we were able to amend some of our ordinances in exchange for a pilot agreement, which really is going to benefit the Township residents. We estimate about $180,000 a year in revenue to the township, so that's really a huge win. A few other things, I'm going to turn it over to Tony. The BBMK Medical Building, many of you know there's some girders going up on Route 35 going south. That's going to be a state-of-the-art medical facility. We seem to be flush with medical facilities, but very, very different from the Sloan property. And that's something that's going to be a very significant added assessment. Everybody's heard about it, I think by now, the Ice World, that's now part of the swim club complex. So a lot of good things happening. Certainly, one other thing I wanted to mention. The building, when you're going south on Route 35, right before you go over the Cooper Bridge into Red Bank, will be, I think, 100% occupied after being vacant for many years, probably by the end of this year or at least early next year, which will be very beneficial to the town. Certainly there's going to be more people and more economic activity to the local restaurants and the convenience stores, and certainly the hotels in town, but also an added assessment because they're going to be 100% occupied. So we have some really good things going on in town. The Economic Development Committee is another reason that this is a good thing. And when businesses look at towns to settle it, and they see that we have an Economic Development Committee, that goes a long way because it looks like we're aggressive and very welcoming to business. So we really wanted to put out the welcome mat for businesses all over the state, that Middletown really is very aggressive. We're going to be putting out a survey to every business in town to try and see what initiatives we can take, maybe what amendments to ordinances that are in place already, to help the town become more business friendly. And this is going to be something where we get input from the folks on the ground who really have to deal with these things every day. And we know, New Jersey's been struggling over the past few years, and we certainly can't wait for the federal government to get their act together. So we have to be very aggressive at the local level here, and I think we're off to a very good start. So without any more out of me, I want to turn it over to Tony Mercantante to show you some of the properties that we're going to be looking at. And then I was hoping to open it up to everybody here for their ideas on what kind of businesses you would like to see come in. Maybe you have some ideas on some properties that you would like to see us pursue tenants for. And certainly, if there's something as a business owner that we can change or do here in Middletown, now's a great time to let us know. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tony Mercantante.
Okay. Before we get started on the specific locations throughout the township, I just want to give you some basic information about the town. And some of it may be boring and things you already know, but some of it may not be, because one of the things we find is that dealing with people throughout the township, not everyone has a really good understanding of what the entire township encompasses. There are still people who think some of our neighborhoods are separate towns and have separate governments, and so just to clear it up for everyone, what you see highlighted there is the entirety of Middletown Township. You'll also notice that Sandy Hook is highlighted. Sandy Hook is under the jurisdiction of Middletown Township. Even though it's a national park under the National Park Service and the military to a certain degree, it is Middletown Township. When people were living in Sandy Hook, they voted in Middletown Township. When they have school children, they went to school in Middletown Township. So it is a part of the township, and a lot of people don't really realize that. We're also a compilation of neighborhoods, as many of you know. They have all different names. We have 12 elementary schools, one for each neighborhood. They all have, well, not all, most have their own zip code. They all have a certain identity. Some of them have their own little business nodes or business districts. We'll see a little bit of that. But it's all Middletown Township. It all falls under the umbrella of the township. So it's a uniquely arranged municipality. Approximately 42 square miles if you count Sandy Hook, and about 67,000 people. What's interesting about the population is that if you ask the average person, they would probably tell you our population has exploded in recent years. But if you go back to 1980, our population was about the same as it is today. And it's changed a very, very small amount since that time. The last three census, we're at 64 to 66 to 67,000. We actually went down slightly in the last census. So, and people find that hard to believe when new things seem to be getting built. The fact is that the demographics are changing, family structure and family size is changing. People aren't having 3 and 4 children anymore, and so the demographics of the community have changed. But our population has been very stable. And one other bit of information before we get into the sites, Our school population has been very stable and actually lower than it was 30 years ago. Okay, our school population in the 70s was about 13,000 children in the public school system. In 1980, it was around 11,000. Now we went down to about 9,600 at one time in the early 90s. We're back up to about 10,000, a little over 10,000 now, but we still haven't caught up to where we were 30, 40 years ago. So it's kind of hard to believe, but that's the way things have evolved here. We'll go on to the next slide, but leave that just 1 second, please. Sorry. So everyone knows what our primary commercial corridors are: Route 36, Route 35, County Route 520, and you can see the Garden State Parkway in orange there, so coursing through the southern portion of the township. Okay, this is the Sloan Kettering site. This is, as the mayor mentioned, this is located at exit 114. It's a large site, has a nearly 300,000 square foot office building on it. This type of building is one of the biggest challenges we have, and not just Middletown, it's really throughout New Jersey, and probably throughout the country. These large campus-style office complexes are there's just not a market for them like there was 25, 35 years ago when they were built. Corporations were moving out of cities, they were moving to suburban locations, they were moving into the big mega complexes, and there was a time when particularly in the early to mid 1980s, they were very, very popular, and they were being built everywhere. Now they're a bit like dinosaurs, because there's not really with technology, there's not really the need for superstructures like that anymore. We have others. As the mayor mentioned, it's more than lucky to get Sloan Kettering to take this facility, because its future would have been bleak if they didn't, because there's really not a lot out there for these types of facilities. This is probably the biggest and most difficult one to deal with. This is the AT&T complex. For those of you not familiar with the location, it's on the sort of left side of it, that is Laurel Avenue, which is also the Homedale border. On the southerly side, that's Holland Road, and on the top portion of the property, that's actually bounded by the railroad, North Jersey coastline. This property is well over 200 acres. It has about 1.8 million square feet of office space on it now. There's actually approval for an additional 1 million square feet of space to be built on that site. And again, it's a real challenge because, as I said before, the market for corporate headquarters of the type that were built 30 years ago just is not there anymore. So it's going to be a challenge for AT&T, who now actually own the property. At the time this was built, they did not own it. They do now. But they have the right to build another 1 million square feet. The road work you've seen going on out there for the past 10 years on Laurel Avenue and out by exit 114 with the changes to the signalization, that was all done in anticipation of this being fully built out. Don't know if it ever will be. We've had some preliminary conversations with AT&T about whether or not they might want to rethink the future use of the remainder of that site, but that really hasn't gone too far at this point. But that's going to be a challenge going forward, is to figure out how we're going to deal with this property. Because on the one hand, we could say, well, it'd be great if nothing happens, and from a traffic standpoint, that might be good. But I'm pretty sure that AT&T aren't going to let 1 million square feet approved space go away. They're going to try to figure out some way to reap the benefit of that. On the other end of town, this is the Port of Belford. Anybody not been to the Belford Seafood Co-op or familiar with it? This is at the end of, essentially at the end of Main Street or Port Monmouth Road, depending on which direction you're coming from. This is the home of our commercial fishing industry, and it's a site that we've been focusing on a lot in recent years, trying to study ways to help help that industry survive. As those of you who probably know, the fishing industry is a tough business. It's getting tougher with regulations and restrictions on catch limits and seasonal limits, and they're struggling, and they're trying to figure out some ways to get creative to survive. We're trying to help them. We have a Port of Belford redevelopment plan or study that's been done. It's on our website, which if you read, I think you'll find really, really interesting. But in addition, immediately adjacent to that is a 10-acre site. You have the next slide. Yeah. So what you see is the Belford Seafood Co-op right along the left side in the highlighted area on the left side of Compton's Creek, the mouth to Compton Creek. Of course, on the right side of the creek, you probably all know is the ferry terminal. But the remainder of that property between the Seafood Co-op and the Dunes development, which is the townhouses just to the upper left, is about a 9 or 10 acre undeveloped tract of land. Vacant, it's developable, it's not wetlands, it's highland. It used to be part of the old fish factory site, for those of you who are really old and know what I'm talking about. But there used to be a factory on that property, and it's been previously developed, so it could be certainly redeveloped. It's one of the few remaining waterfront developable properties around. If you've ever been there, the view across the bay is unmatchable. It's beautiful. It also has an interesting deed restriction on the property, which says that it can't be used for residential development. It has to be commercial of some sort. So that piece of property is important for the co-op, because if a use could get developed on that property that could be sort of complementary to their activities, again, it might help their long-term ability to survive. And we all think that keeping that industry as a real part of the community character is a very, very important thing to do. You know, I think everyone agrees that that industry should be saved, and we should try to take whatever measures we can to make that happen. This is the North Middletown district. We have long been looking at ways to try to revitalize. There's a commercial node in North Middletown near Ideal Beach, just up the street from Ideal Beach. The major intersection being Port Monmouth Road and Ocean Avenue. There's a little cluster of businesses. At one time, very vital. There was a grocery store. There was a laundromat, there were some other retailers, there was a gas station, there was a delicatessen on the other corner, there's a couple of other small businesses in the area, barbershop. Struggled in recent years. One of the things that hurt for many years was, if those of you who aren't familiar with the area, Port Monmouth Road, which is the major east-west road, was closed for many, many years because of the bridge over Pew's Creek being taken out some years ago, and it took a long time to get that bridge replaced. I think that hurt the area, but the road's intact now. The property there we refer to as the Lunny's property primarily, but that's at the southwest corner of Ocean Avenue and Port Monmouth Road. Ocean Avenue runs north and south, Port Monmouth Road runs east and west. Here, we've been trying to work with the property owner to secure that property and try to get it redeveloped. The building is to say it's in poor condition would be a compliment, probably. It's really, really bad. We've actually ordered the demolition of it recently. Problem with some of these properties, just so you understand the challenges that you face when you're dealing with these, the Lunny's property was sold at an auction. The person who bought it at the auction then passed away. The reason it was being auctioned because the original owner had passed away. By the time a third owner came along and acquired it, the property had numerous liens on it, going back many, many years. The town, we've actually made an offer to purchase it ourselves to try to get it to redeveloped. We couldn't even clear up the title to it. There are so many IRS liens, other sorts of mechanic liens on the property that encumber it. So no one's going to buy it in their right mind because they can't get a clean title to it. And the only one who could really clear it up is the property owner, they're just not interested, and we can't make them do certain things. So unfortunately, we're probably going to have to make them demolish the building, and it'll be an empty lot for a while until we can get something going. Yeah, there it is. It's beautiful, isn't it? It was a nice building one time. It's a grocery store. There were 2 or 3 apartments upstairs, and it was a real neighborhood asset. People in the neighborhood walked there and could utilize it. The elderly could walk there and utilize it. It's been empty for years now, and the reality is if we don't do something to spur something to happen, nothing's going to happen. So, but what you do is always the debate, because we're not in the development business per se as a town. Although cities tend to do more redevelopment type projects and get directly involved in the redevelopment business. Towns generally don't do that. We theoretically could, and that may be a step we have to take in the future. But we prefer to work with the private sector to get private investors involved and get them interested. And hopefully we can come up. We've developed a concept plan to redevelop the entire block with residential and commercial development. But someone's got to take the gamble and try to make it happen. This is an area, in our master plan, we identified certain areas for potential redevelopment, areas that really have some uniqueness to them or some unique benefit to them. North Middletown was one of them. This is another area, and everyone familiar with Werner Dodge? That's just the best landmark here. He's not key to this or anything, that's the landmark on the highway. This is Highway 36, and essentially it's Main Street, Belford, Church Street, Belford, and the side streets are Railroad Avenue, that's the main one, and then the Henry Hudson Trail runs along the north end of that area. This is an area that's really just a hodgepodge of different uses. There's industrial uses there. There's steel. Did anyone know we had a steel fabricating plant in Middletown? We did. There's a steel fabricating business there. We have residences in there. We have storage yards. We have sign companies. We have all sorts of businesses kind of jammed together in this area, interspersed with houses here and there. So, but you wonder where people choose to live, but maybe that's the only place someone can live. But it's a kind of a hodgepodge area. It would be nice to work with. There's a few landowners in there. It'd be nice to try to work with a developer to take a look at that whole area comprehensively, come up with a new development plan for it, because it's really pretty unsightly right now. But again, it's not easy coming up with, okay, we know we don't like what we have, but what do we want instead? And to try to get everyone to buy into that. Everyone's going to have a different opinion, but that's a challenge. So that is an area we think we should focus on. This is Campbell's Junction. Campbell's Junction and Lincroft business areas are probably our 2 most vital neighborhood-oriented business districts. Again, away from the state highways. But this area is a focal point of the town. It's technically in Belford, but it really serves many parts of the township. Again, a group of businesses located around primarily the intersection of Leonardville Road and Main Street in Belford. A number of different businesses in there, but also a number of properties that are undeveloped or vacant. There's an empty Getty gas station on there. Everyone's probably driven past it 1,000 times. It looks like something that actually was happening over there recently. I think they were doing some tank removal work finally. But an eyesore. There's a property down the street from there that was a tool rental business at one time that's now been closed for years. It's just a total eyesore. Mixed in with some really nice businesses, really good and healthy businesses that serve the community very well. We've done some work in Campbell's Junction over the years. We actually created some zoning amendments a couple of years ago to try to help some of the property owners to redevelop their properties. And we created some special standards that let people do second-story residential. So you can see that was one there. As you know, that property, which is, again, there used to be a pharmacy there many years ago. And across the street from there, there was another shopping center. Both of those put second-story apartments on them. It made the buildings look better, because 2-story buildings are always nicer looking than 1-story buildings. It gave the property owners some rental opportunities. created some people in the area who actually live there all the time, so there was some presence there of people. We had some creative standards that we used because obviously parking is very limited in places like this, though. So what we did was we gave some credit to the to the landowner or to the developer for minimizing their parking requirements because they were within a certain distance of a transit stop. Again, any of you familiar with Campbell's Junction, there's a reason it's called the Junction. It's a major transit hub. There are 3 bus routes that stop there. And so because the people who live there could easily take a bus to almost anywhere, we gave a little bit of credit for that. So it eased the parking restrictions or parking requirements, and it helped the 2 properties redevelop. We'd like to see other property owners in the area take advantage of the same thing, but again, it takes money, and it's not easy, but we want to try to do whatever we can to plant a seed for people to make some changes. This is Harmony Bowl. This is another area that we've kind of focused on. The Harmony Bowl site, for those of you, I'm sure everyone's familiar with that. I mean, you know, maybe there's 40 cars in there some nights, but it's a gigantic parking lot, huge sea of asphalt. And it's got a shopping center next to it where there's a lumber business, and I think they have windows and stuff. Again, kind of an eyesore of a building. There's a vacant 5-acre piece right behind the property. So it's ripe for some new kind of redevelopment, a new fresh look at that property. You know, again, we can't really initiate that other than making people aware of it, but hopefully we can get some investors who might be interested in it. It's a fairly prominent location, right on Route 35, southbound, and excuse me, northbound. And you know, it's got a lot of potential because it's a big, largely undeveloped space. I think the lumber building next door I could knock down if I just ran into it. It's really bad. It's really an old building, in bad shape. So again, these buildings that are just kind of eyesores and detractions, they don't help anyone. You know, I mean, obviously the landowner is the owner, but nearby businesses, people who live in the area, not really benefited by it. In fact, it's a detriment when they start to deteriorate that badly. Probably the thing we get asked about most is what's going into Pathmark. The answer is we don't know. Every now and then we think we hear about something that might be going into Pathmark, but there are no takers right now. This is one of the biggest challenges we have. I should just talk about this for a minute. Commercial spaces like this that sit empty, okay? At the same time, somebody sees a new building being built, and people inevitably say, well, why are you letting somebody build a new building when you have all this empty space? Well, let me explain a little bit about how that process works, and this is the law. Towns don't get to pick and choose where things go, where businesses are built. We create commercial areas, but we don't specifically choose the businesses. I remember when the Chase Bank on Highway 35 on Chapel Hill Road, everyone knows that? So many people said to me, God, what do we need another bank for? Right, it's a bank on now 3 corners of that intersection. And my answer was, we don't pick and choose. We don't tell the market. You know, that's not our role as government to tell the market, we have enough banks now, give us something else. We can't do that. So while we might agree that, geez, the last thing we need is another bank, no offense, you know, the market's decided they want to put a bank there. Somebody's willing to invest $5 million or whatever it's going to take to put that bank there. That's the private sector's role. It's not really ours. So the same thing with things like this is we would love to see somebody move into Pathmark, but we can't make it happen per se. We can't talk somebody into it as opposed to building somewhere else or going somewhere else. The market has to dictate. But what we can do is try to help the marketplace out there be aware that we have spaces like this that are potentially available and usable, and try to convince people of why they should want to move here, why it's a good community. And that's part of the reason for the survey. We want to get some data as to what works, what doesn't work, what's good, what's not good, what do business and property owners need to succeed here. So, and challenges like the Pathmark one are a key one. We did get a suggestion, an emailed suggestion, you saw it, Mayor, in response to some of the articles and the press releases that have been sent out about this meeting. Somebody wrote about kind of an indoor sort of flea market. Was it the person who wrote it here, by the way? They said they might come. But it was like an indoor place where you could divide it up and let people kind of rent out space, and almost like an English town type thing, but indoors, and let people rent out a space and sell a product. And I thought, again, anybody's been around long enough. Does anyone remember Action Auction? A couple people do. On Highway 36, where Gutenplans is now, at one point was a store there, and when the store closed down, it was sort of like a Grand Union type of store. When it closed, it turned into a place for a while called Action Auction, and that's exactly what it was. It was indoors. You walk in through the hallways, and there are various different vendors selling different things, and it worked for a few years. But it's just amazing now that's been closed for 30 years probably, or more, and someone has just suggested that same idea for Pathmark. Again, we can't control what the landlords are interested in allowing to go into their spaces. People always ask, well, why does the space sit like that for such a long time empty? Sometimes it's because even though Pathmark may be out of there, they may still be paying a lease. They still may be paying rent to the shopping center owner. So from the shopping center owner's perspective, he's not too bothered. He's still getting his rent payment. And from Pathmark's perspective, they may still be paying rent, but they're also not paying the overhead of all their employees and all their products. So it may be cheaper for them to be out of there and pay their rent for the next couple of years than it would be to reopen the store. So that's why some of those spaces sit like that for a long time. They're still collecting a rent. I don't know for sure if that's still the case now with Pathmark, but we've had experience over the years with grocery stores closing down, and oftentimes their lease goes well beyond the time they actually close. So that's sometimes the reason they sit empty for such a long time. As mentioned, this is, there are some new things happening. This is a medical building being built. It's actually right near Town Hall on Route 35. It should be a good asset to the community, another new employment opportunity, another new opportunity for people for health care. So there is interest, and we seem to be seeing that medical is there's a big interest in medical. I mean, besides Sloan Kettering, we have other smaller office developments that are coming along, and they tend to be based primarily in medical uses. This is a new building on the corner of Church Street and Route 36. This is a law office. If you remember, those of you who may remember, there was a little house there that a law firm moved into, very, very small. The owner of the property decided to reinvest in the area, build a new building. The tree kind of blocks it, but it's really a beautiful building. Now it's almost finished. They had to actually elevate it even further than they originally planned to after Sandy. But really nice asset to the area. It's taken out what was probably a 60-year-old bungalow that was used for a law office, and now it's going to be a real nice commercial asset to that area. And residential. This is Oak Hill Estates. Have anybody seen those houses? They're down off of Dwight Road, not far from exit 114. Probably be occupied by Sloan Kettering doctors one of these days. But they're $900,000, $1 million houses, and they're all bought, from what I've been told. So somebody's buying houses around here for big bucks. And residential. We've talked a lot about commercial, but residential development is an important component to this. If we want healthy commercial, if we want healthy shopping centers, there's got to be somebody who's going to go there and spend their money. And they're not here now, because if they were, they'd be successful commercial entities. You need new property owners, you need new residents, you need new money to help really grow the commercial base here. So it's really got to be a combination of the two things, of commercial development, commercial revitalization, and people to support it. So I think that's all we had. Yeah, that's it. We'll be happy to take questions, if you want to add anything.
I'll just,
Before we open it up to questions, I just wanted to, in fact, I should have mentioned this before, that one other building, which is really going to be not a large economic development project, but still something that's very important. Many of you may know that big white building on Kings Highway. It's directly across from Town Hall. And I think it was built in the 1820s. And at one time it was a retirement home. And most recently, talk about the other end of the spectrum, it was a daycare center. And it was empty for a number of years now. And a fellow bought it, and he came before the Landmark Commission. And apparently what he does is he buys these older buildings, maybe not always that old, but things that are a little bit obsolete, and he transforms them, brings them up to code, and brings them up to the more modern, appealing designs that you see. And he's had a great success rate with them. And he's going to take that building and refurbish it, protecting all of the historic elements. But it's going to be doctors' offices and probably attorneys' offices, which makes a lot of sense, being so close to Town Hall and certainly the court there. So that's one of the other sort of quiet little projects we have going on that should be getting underway fairly soon. But what I thought we could do now is open it up to questions, suggestions, whatever you have, and then we'll sort of tie everything up with what we're doing with the state and put it all in perspective then. So just feel free. This is very informal. If you could raise your hand, and if you want to introduce yourself, that's fine. We'd like to know if you're a business owner, a resident, potential business person coming into Middletown, whatever it may be. But feel free to say whatever is on your mind. Young lady in the front.
Kerry, what about the Avaya property? What's going on there?
Next question. Well, I mean, I can't say a lot because it's sort of still in the planning board, and there's some litigation going on, but it's before the planning board, so the planning board, I think, is sort of mulling over their response to the court's decision. So, I'd rather leave it at that, just because it's right in the middle. I don't want to compromise anything. Bam Hollow, well, that I can talk a little bit about. I mean, they're in the process now, but being that it was a golf course, naturally there's some environmental issues, as far as chemicals in the soil, and to what extent it is, we're not really sure, but again, that's sort of working its way through the process now. And, when you go through the DEP process with contamination and issues like that, it's never a quick run. So, we'll see. But that's where they're at now. They're dealing with that, and it's going to take as long as it's going to take.
And what's the zoning there? Is that 5-acre zoning for residential?
It's an R10.
Well, it's not really 5-acre zoning. I mean, there was a special zoning put in place there in settlement of a litigation, essentially. And so there's going to be 190 houses on 200 and some acres, and about 100 acres total being dedicated as open space on the site.
Just to add to that, 190 houses down from 1,200. Tony Fiore, am I right? 1,200 they came in with? A little higher, okay. So we dodged the bullet with that one, let's put it that way. Anyone else? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I live in North Middletown, so I'm just residential. My name's Kimberly.
Hi, Kim.
Hi. I first of all want to thank you for planning on demolishing Lunny's, because that would be a huge improvement to the area.
Yeah.
And I know it's hard to get somebody to then come to the area when they're going to build,
Yeah.
I think they drive around the area and look at the residential part of it and say, these people don't have money, what am I going to care?
Yeah.
And, a lot of the properties, and there's people in the area that make a decent living. They're not rich, but they make a decent living. Then there's the other element that basically just slums there. and, they're not taking care of their properties whatsoever.
Mhm.
They're rotting away, which brings me to an issue with code enforcement,
Mhm.
because I don't feel enough is being done. I mean, I'm new to the area, maybe, maybe I'm a little naive on that, but I don't feel enough is being done because I've had to make calls myself to complain to get something done.
Well, the best thing to do in a case like that, and you're probably our best ally in taking care of these problems, is when you see a property that's being, let go and, not maintained, you have to call us. In fact, you can call my office, or you can call just to make sure that, I'm aware of it. But it's very important that you call us and let code enforcement start the ball rolling. We don't have dictatorial powers where we can just say, you must do this or else. You have to go through a process. There's a warning, and there's fines, and then eventually it ends up in court. But it's never a quick process, and you hope you get a cooperative property owner where, with a little nudge from code enforcement, they would do it on their own. But sometimes, and we have some, and Tony Mercantanti can back me up on this, that there are some properties where, it's in the courts now, and there's, jail time even for people who repeatedly overlook and ignore summonses and court orders. So that's number one. So that's a very effective tool, and our code enforcement is very busy. They're stretched pretty thin, but they do a great job. They really do, and they're very aggressive in pursuing this, and they know the law. They know how far they can go and how far they can push it, and they really do keep on top of it. But we have to be alerted to it. We don't have people driving around just looking for violations. So, yeah, okay. But that's where you can be a great asset and a partner with us. So if you would do that, that would be.
It really is a jewel that I find. I can't believe that it hasn't been developed enough yet. I mean, we're on the border. We had no damage, which we discussed in a meeting before.
Absolutely, yeah.
And which I really hope we conquer. And it could really be something fabulous. I don't understand how Long Branch was just a certain area at one point, and then here it comes, they build Pier Village.
Do you know the history of Long Branch?
No, I don't.
It wasn't just built, Pier Village.
No, I know. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
It just seems like it can be done. Like anything's possible.
Yeah.
That's what
Oh,
I'm
sure.
getting at. Is
Yeah.
that we have such a beautiful beachfront.
But just to clarify, Long Branch, it became the poster child for eminent domain, and it made national headlines. So. You see this pretty Pier Village, but there were a lot of, bloody fights along the way. So, nothing, we don't ever want to go down that road. But we feel that that's a jewel, and that's an important component of Middletown that's unique, because you have sort of a working class, middle class neighborhood there near the water. You don't just have Bon Jovi sitting there looking over the bay. So it's really unique, and we realize that. We want to keep that character and help polish it up. We want to polish that jewel, is I guess the best way to put it. So you can help us with that, and you're right. I mean, if people take care of their houses and make it more attractive, business owners, in fact, Sloan did that too. They drove around the area, they know where the train station is, they know the parkway's there, so they know the surrounding areas. They're not going to bring their employees in, to Dodge City. They're going to come into an area that is really attractive and really, has a great quality of life, which we do. And especially North Middletown, because we're one of the few areas that have the free beaches and all the amenities up there. So we really want to do everything we can to protect that and expand upon it and make it better. And this is one of the ways. We're going to get started. We're very aggressive, but as Tony mentioned, there's a process. You can't even track down the owners half the time. Half the time they live out of the state, and it's very difficult. So there's no quick or magic bullet.
But isn't there a certain guideline there where they're letting the property pretty much go to pieces? And isn't there a way to close on that, basically?
Well, if they're paying taxes, then you just have to fight them with the violations of the property maintenance thing. But if they're not, then eventually you can trigger a seizure of it. So, but thanks, and please let us know if there's properties out there. We'll be very aggressive, and we'll get right on it.
Over here.
Okay. Hey, Greta.
Hi. Thank you very much for having tonight's meeting. This is very informative. We appreciate it. And like Ken, because we're from the same neighborhood, in each community, we really appreciate you coming out to our community and talking with us about the urgent, the flood zones, the whole situation of insurance and so forth. So we thank you for that. We thank you for your concern on behalf of including us as part of your redevelopment and committee discussions and so forth. Two questions.
Sure.
Back to our business district and specifically Lenny's. When you have a business owner who just seems to just sit on the property, I guess there are big clouds over the oil and so forth and what's underground, and now there's discussion if I'm moving forward, I take it that's a solid of tearing it down. How long though could this wait and see kind of situation go on with the owner just kind of not doing anything?
Well, I guess there's milestones you have to meet as far as timeframes when you can trigger certain actions, right?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, it's been going on for a long time now, and it's really hard, because as the mayor mentioned, I mean, ultimately, the town's tool is eminent domain, to literally take a piece of property. We've generally not wanted to do that, to not take a property from people, because it starts you down a slippery slope. But where you see redevelopment happening in cities and in places like Long Branch, that's what they did, and it worked. And some people thought it was great, but there were some people who were at the wrong end of the stick on that, who didn't think it was all that great. In the case of Lenny's, they've been ordered to demolish it. Now, again, we can't physically grab them by the scruff of the neck and say, go demolish your building. But ultimately, if they don't do it, we can go and do it ourselves, and we would lien the property. But again, it's really a last resort, because it could cost us $10,000, $20,000 to demolish the building. Then what happens with the contamination? We're certainly not going to clean that up. That's underground, but it's an issue. Now it's exposed, maybe. So, you know, it's not so easy. You could wind up spending $50,000 to demolish property and then lien the property. You're going to lien a property that's already got a bunch of liens on it. It's not worth anything. So you may never get your money back. Now, again, that's all the taxpayers' money is going to clean up and demolish one property. Then somebody says, well, you know, there's a really bad building over there. Why don't you do the same thing there? Oh, and there's another one in that area. When do you stop doing that? You can end up hundreds of thousands of dollars of budget money going towards demoing private properties. And so it's really, I mean, we may end up coming to that point on Lenny's, because that's so over the top in terms of how bad it is. But we want to exhaust every possibility before getting to that.
Second question to that. So when you have a situation like that, and I think you also mentioned the Harmony Bowl, right? When you have situations like that, do you as a township have a song and dance, a marketing plan that you kind of put out there to draw in? You talked about Sloan Kettering, how you did whatever you did, and we've got this wonderful new business situation. Are there things that you actively do?
You know what, Greta, we can't market properties. We're not commercial brokers.
Right.
But what we can do is create the environment where business would want to come in. For instance, a great example, and we're going to keep referring back to Sloan, was where with the zoning, the ordinance amendments that they needed, that's something that we could handle. But as far as physically taking a property and saying, hey Joe, I hear you're looking for a property, we can't do that, you know, probably legally, but we certainly can't get into that sort of marketing thing, because then you'll have a list of people say, well, how about mine? You're going to market mine and start to do that. But we can make everything else around it as attractive as possible to come in, which may mean amending our ordinances to make them a little less onerous with certain, you know, certain aspects of owning a business here. Certainly working with the business owner for whatever they would need, in addition to the commercial, you know, brokerage houses.
So I guess marketing is not the right word. I will reel that back in, but I guess the climate is created. How do other people out and about know about the climate? Is there some vehicle in which other...
Tonight's a start. But these are the kind of things, and we're trying to raise awareness. And I hate that, because it sounds like such a hokey thing. But really trying to raise awareness how important this is. And even if you're not a business owner or don't have a commercial property, 67,000 people in Middletown have a stake in businesses doing well here and coming in here. Everybody benefits. When that commercial tax rateable base expands, everybody else's residential property taxes stabilize or could go down in a really, really healthy market. Now, you know, one thing to keep in mind, I'm always trying to look at that glass as being not half full, but almost full. In a horrible economic climate, with the worst recession that we've seen in dozens of years, Middletown has really weathered that storm fairly well. So we're holding our own in a very, very bad market. So if we're preparing ourselves for the future when things hopefully get better at some point, we're really going to take off. And that's when you're really going to see the benefits of what we're doing now. So as much as possible, we're going to try and remind people how important it is. Middletown matters. This issue that we had out, we tried to really drum home everything that's happening for the positive, And this way people maybe would read that and, maybe it's wishful thinking. But the person taking care of that would maybe take care of their house and say, hey, listen, this town is really, progressing and doing great things. I want to be a part of it. I mean, you have to have that sense instilled in people that this town is worth promoting and really worth taking care of your part of the town for the greater good of the whole. So that's what we're trying to do. And the Economic Development Committee is going to be, we meet once a month. We have the property tax card that will be rolled out fairly soon with the last details, which is going to be a great, great boon to business. And believe me, we've seen it work in other areas fairly well, and we think it's safe to try here. So I think that's going to be a really good thing for not only every residential property owner, but also businesses coming in and say, listen, Middletown has this great program that will help drive my business in town. So it's a really good thing. So all of these things are going to start to get out into the consciousness, because people are, have busy lives and a lot going on, and to get their attention sometimes is not the easiest thing, as being involved in a community organization. Doesn't mean you stop trying, just means you have to really keep at it, and eventually it will catch on. And we've gotten a lot of great feedback. I've met a lot of people in the past couple of months, and a lot of people know about Sloan, and they're really excited about it. And that's the kind of thing that really, is contagious. And we think that'll snowball into, more businesses coming in, seeing, hey, Sloan's coming in. There's a great clientele coming in there, and let's move to Middletown. Yes, hey, Heather. When did you sneak in?
I was at zoning first. Well, going back to the economic development, congratulations. I think it's a great concept of having the meetings, especially with the county also working on their new planning system and trying to implement for the future. So it's a great hand in glove, and I think it's a great opportunity looking at economic development. Going back to Sloan Kettering, this is tremendous congratulations. That's a nice use of that property that's been vacant for an awful long time. And also touched briefly on housing, the new houses up on Red Hill. Yes, they all sold very nicely, pretty much in the $1 million range. But there really weren't that many of them. So there was a very small niche for new homes in Middletown. So I'm going to segue over to the Four Ponds development. That is still on the...
Let's see Avaya property, just in case.
Well, it was a former Avaya site. There is a planning board meeting on the 30th, wherein the proposal is being remanded back to Middletown for review. So it is not something that's going away. I just want everyone to be aware of it and not think that just because it was denied at one point that nothing is going to go in there. The property owners obviously have a right to build something. It's not determined exactly what it will be, but I think it would behoove most of us who live in Middletown to participate in that meeting, because 340 units is an awful lot for a small section of Middletown, any part of Middletown, to absorb. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. You know what, I won't respond to the latter part, but I will respond, and you're 110% right about the county. I know Tom Arnone has been very aggressive with their economic development program that they have in the county. And also the state has been a great partner, and we see it over and over again. And that's probably one of the really good things to come out of this whole initiative, where you see 3 levels of government really working well together. And how many times you read something in the paper, what are they thinking? one hand doesn't know what the other's doing. Here we have a great example of 3 levels of government who really work well together, and we see it once again in Sloan, where it took the county and the state working in conjunction with the municipality to really pull off a very complex project. And when you look across the state, and you maybe have, just for argument's sake, 30 vacant corporate campuses, and maybe there are 4 or 5 entities looking to move, it's, there's a lot of competition for those 4 or 5 organizations to come in. And that's what we were facing with Sloan Kettering, and we really, worked well together, and it really shows what can be done when all levels work, and that's really something, sort of a side benefit that came out, that it can work and it does work well. Okay. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Tom Emerson. I'm with over at Village Lane.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Tom.
Party. How you doing? It occurred to me there a lot of great accomplishments have come about by partnership between the government, the private, and the public sectors. Have we looked at potentially reaching out to some of the academic institutions like Monmouth University and Rutgers and Brookdale, and seeing what they're doing in terms of entrepreneurial type businesses or classes? I saw the Pathmark, kind of flea market thing. I love flea markets, and also thought about things they're doing in New York in terms of incubators for some of the high-tech stuff. Bloomberg's partnering with Cornell University and private sectors. So maybe a little bit ambitious, but I think sometimes there's a good synergy there between those 3 elements.
It's coincidental that you should ask that question, because I had a meeting with President Gaffney, Paul Gaffney of Monmouth University, and my friend Pete Reinhardt, who's the executive director of the Kisling Institute. That's sort of the real estate arm or department down at Monmouth, about this very thing, to sort of look at their program offerings as far as businesses and that sort of thing, where they see it going, and to get some input. But also they need input too from the business community on what sort of graduates they need. Now, New Jersey is very notable. They have a very educated workforce. We have more advanced degrees per capita than any other state in the union. And that's very attractive to sort of, pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies and certainly financial. But you need that production line out of universities continuing, say, before a company would move in here and make that sort of commitment. So you're right, that's absolutely, the way to do it, to work hand in hand with higher education and, to make sure we have that pool.
Yeah, perhaps a forum such as this where you could invite some of the college folks as well as some businesses and kind of get some dialogue going.
That's an excellent idea. You know what, we can have them come into one of the Economic Development Committee meetings and talk to them about what we're doing municipally here. And they're always open. I have to give them credit. Monmouth University, I'm naturally a little bit biased towards them, but they are very, very open to working with the communities that they serve here. They're a Monmouth County institution for, now 80 years. So that's a great idea to have them come in, maybe some of the business department. Amy Hanlon, the assembly woman, she teaches in the business department. Everybody thinks she teaches poli-sci because she's an assembly woman, but she's actually associate professor in the business department. So she would be a great, liaison for that department. But that's a great idea. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, 25 to 35 years ago, I lived in North Middletown, and maybe some of these residents can relate to this. But back then, there was like a deli on almost every corner down there. Like every 4 blocks, there was a deli, and people patronized these places. Most of them have gone away now, but you have places like Backstats or Bavacqua's also, right? And I know these stores, they only stock the bare minimum to keep themselves alive. So if you go in and ask them for other items, maybe that might stock them, and if everybody starts shopping there, the owners will take the initiative to fix the place up a little bit, to bring in other owners for further development, and that's how it's got to have to start.
Okay, thank you. I see somebody else's hand. Yes.
I
want to also thank you. I mean, this was very, very informative, and the slideshow was really well put together. And I think it's great that you're giving the public and the businesses an opportunity to come in and to share their ideas and to hear some of the initiatives that are going on. But I think it would be great if we had more opportunities to do that. The Economic Development Committee, I think that was formed in September of 2012, and those, you have monthly meetings, I believe, at least once a month. But those meetings are not open to the public, so I think it would be really great if that was changed so that those meetings were open. And so monthly businesses can come in and the public can come in and share these kind of ideas so that you know about them sooner, so perhaps they can be implemented sooner. And that we'd be that much further ahead of the game. So I hope you would consider that. You can actually, the Township Committee can actually pass an ordinance and open up not only the meetings of this committee, but all of the boards in town could be opened up to the public for the same purpose.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I just was curious, there was one property I noticed wasn't on your list, and that's that old S Station building.
Oh, the Hess station. You know what, and Tony, I think you can back me up on this. It's a very small property, and it's very limited in what you can do with it. I know, I drive by it 5 times a day, you know, and I look at it, and it's just such an odd, you know, it's like the island of misfit toys of, you know, properties, commercial properties. And I'm sure there's some contaminants there that have to be dealt with. So somebody has to come in who has a use for a small highway frontage property and be willing to, you know, do what it takes to get it remediated. So has everybody been kicking the tires on that?
There's a car lot in there.
There have been a couple of different businesses that looked to go in there. Some of them, they were approved to go in there, and they just didn't follow through or pan out. But that wasn't the only property that wasn't on there, by the way. The other property that wasn't on there was the Steak and Ale property. I'm amazed nobody asked about that. We just didn't get a chance to get a shot of that one, but I know everyone knows that property. Again, we've had a couple of different interests in maybe redeveloping or doing something with that property. None of them panned out yet to the point where they've made it to the planning board. But that's obviously a very key property that really something we'd like to see something nice and beneficial to the community go there. What that is, again, might be debatable for people. One other thing I want to mention, because someone was talking about, you know, how there were delis on every corner at one time. And, you know, one of the things that's changed radically, and we just have to learn to deal with it, is, you know, I said before that our school population is smaller than it used to be. Our general population is no different than it used to be. It has been for 30 years. But people always say, why is there so much traffic? Why can't I get through an intersection on just one light? You know, and that's what's really changed. You know, we've become so auto-dependent now. 30 years ago, when Don Watson used to go to those delis, maybe each household had one car, right? Maybe, because there was probably only one working member of the family. Well, then there became 2 working members of each family, right? So that doubled the number of cars on the road. Just been doing that. Then, I don't know, those of you who are older know when I was in high school, maybe 1 out of 10 kids had a car. Now, every kid, it's a rite of passage, turn 17, you get a car. Now, so that's 2, 3, maybe 4 cars per household. So the houses back those days that used to maybe generate 1 car, and that car was gone from 8 to 5 or 8 to 6 all day. Now there's 4 cars per household going about and doing things. And so people don't walk to that corner deli anymore. They're getting in their car, they're going to the highway, they're going to Red Bank, they're going to wherever. So we've got to adjust and understand that those things have changed. So the way we have to look at commercial development, retail development, providing services to people, it's changed. We're not going to get people to walk down to the corner anymore for the most part. We're going to have to rely on the fact that we're auto-dependent. We're not going to undo that. So we have to deal with it and figure out ways to do it through land use and planning policies.
Yes, sir.
Just one quick question. As far as perception on, as you're coming down 36, do you guys have any type of cooperation with Keensburg as far as the better good for Monmouth County? I mean, you want to draw businesses to Route 36, and all we see as soon as you go up the highway is within the span of 1 mile, 3 strip clubs, you know, and a ton of used car lots.
I know exactly what you're talking about. And I just want to say something about 36 and Route 35. They're state highways. So, I mean, as far as what goes on along there, they're zoned for a certain activity. And unfortunately, those establishments, usually fit within the umbrella. And I go through this all the time, and the Township Committee always saying, well, can we prohibit this, can't we prohibit that? And you have to be careful, because you can't zone out, everything that you want, because all of a sudden your zoning will get challenged in court, saying you're devaluing my property, I had somebody who could come, that kind of thing. And it gets really complicated. As far as the look of the roadway too, and I get a lot of complaints about this, that, oh gee, the jug handles are so overgrown, nobody's taking care of it. The state has responsibility for the jug handles and that right of way along Route 36 and Route 35. So legally, we're really not even supposed to go on there. Sometimes our guys would go out and cut it if it really got, ridiculous, but we don't have the manpower to be able to do that. So there's two factors there, on the type of businesses and also the look of the corridor. And we can actually do a little bit more with the state, because we can lean on DOT and say, listen, you have to get a crew out here. And, I can call and, see if I can shake some activity loose. But as far as any cooperation with Keansburg, it's very difficult to tell another municipality what they should allow or not allow. And we have good relationships with all of the mayors around, the surrounding area. We have the Bay Shore Conference of Mayors where we meet once in a while and we talk about these things. And, there's different perspectives out there. I'm not saying that they willingly allow those things or they don't, but it's something that we can certainly make our feelings known, but we have no real leverage to force them to do anything.
You see how 35 is getting nicely built up and 36 is still stagnant. If I'm going to invest money, if I'm driving around and I see that, I'm not going to want to invest or even move down there as far as living, which I do now anyway. But it's all a matter of perception. They see it, it looks seedy, you look somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, Route 36. I mean, the good news is that it's on the state's radar for sort of, I don't want to call it beautification, but sort of to upgrade. Maybe have some really decent development along there. And when that happens, when you have development, it feeds upon itself. Where a nice development comes in, and all of a sudden, nobody really wants to be the first one in the water, but once somebody's in, then you see the crowd. And that's what the state is going to do, maybe try and incentivize some of those areas along sort of the underutilized corridors, like Route 36 or Route 35, even in some areas I've heard of. But you're 100% right. And you know what, I will bring it up to, those other mayors when I see them and just kind of get the feel of where they're at. They may be dealing with things that we're not aware of. With those sort of things. But once those sort of things are entrenched in those areas, it's hard to undo them.
That was my second point. Do you, as Middletown, is there codes in place to prevent a certain, more than a certain number of that type of thing to go into a specific area?
Yeah.
A square mile radius that they can't.
And
they're prohibited. Prohibits.
There's certain uses. I don't want to get too complex with the municipal land use law sets down certain uses for certain properties, and we've seen this over and over again with certain facilities where the state wants to see them maybe along highways to keep them out of neighborhoods, so you have a lot less flexibility along a state highway corridor than you would in the side streets in the neighborhoods, according to the municipal land use law. And if you ever have trouble sleeping and you want to, kind of educate yourself on land use, it's really interesting because you can see the various uses. I mean, they really spell out everything in New Jersey. Unlike Texas, where if you have a daycare center, you could put a tannery next to it, and this zoning is very minimal out there, let's put it that way. Yes, Greta?
It seems like the whole Bay Shore area, not going to keep it in Middletown, of course, in our discussion here, but we have a perfect opportunity to bring activities that are outdoor related, water related, seafood related, the history, maybe a museum of Belford and the fishing industry, and things like that. And when you think about all of Middletown, Middletown is lovely. There's a lot of Middletown, though, that just change the street feels the same, it feels the same, it feels the same.
Sure.
Our area over where we are, the Ideal Beach community, Leonardo, Fort Monmouth, that has a Bill Speaks flavor to it. And it is all about outdoors and kicking off your shoes and going out and boat. And it's about the view and the vista and all of that. And I just wonder if there's some way that we can kind of capture that interest of those. We see cyclists all the time. I mean, they look like a professional, and this is part of their route is they come down into our neighborhood.
Sure.
And I just think, oh, with my camera. I mean, it's just such a joyous sight to see, you know, just people coming in for the joy of it, in other words. And I just wonder if there's some way, to start thinking about it ourselves, all of us, that's why we're here,
Yeah.
to start brainstorming that, and for example, that particular area and what it has to offer that's so unique about it.
Well, it's good you brought that up, because before one of the Economic Development Committee meetings, I think in September, we got in a van and we drove through certain areas, and we drove right past the Ideal Beach, right at the end of, at the T there. Oh, that's right.
We just saw the van go by. That's
So you're my witness, we were there. And we were talking about that very thing, and Tony had mentioned that at one time there was a snack stand there, and there were restrooms, and there were amenities that aren't there now, But I think you have to look at the Bay Shore in totality. There's 12 miles of shoreline. You have the Belford Seafood Co-op, and you have Ideal Beach, you have the Spy House, and it'll forever be the Spy House to me. So I get yelled at every time. Seabrook Whitlock House, but it really is there's a lot of potential there, and just the Spy House with the popularity of that and what that means to the area shows that people would be drawn to that sort of activity there, and that also feeds into the Historic Preservation Committee that we have to expand and engage people in heritage tourism, which is a huge industry. It's a $38 billion industry in this state. So that's one of those things where you don't have to build anything, it's already there. You just have to sort of, grease the skids for people to exploit it. And, so we are looking at that. That's a little bit of a niche industry, if you want to call it that, but it's still something that's very viable, and it's one of those things that I think it causes very, very little change to an area, except to let people know what's there. And a few things you can do to make it more of a day trip, where you have the snack stands and maybe some restaurants and a few things. Certainly the Belford Seafood Co-op, if you're out there, that property is magnificent. When you stand there and you look out of that bay, it could be anywhere. It's as nice as anywhere on the East Coast. It's magnificent. With a little tender loving care, it could really be a showplace. So these are all big picture things that we're thinking of. And we're working aggressively on a lot of things, and that's certainly one of it, that whole Bay Shore area. And it's good for everybody. It's good for everybody's property values. It's good for, just for everybody in general. Certainly more employment opportunities up there for kids, that sort of thing is great for younger people there, and certainly gives them an appreciation of what they have in their own backyard. Yeah, Kathy.
With all the other properties that you showed here that you've targeted, do you have a vision for each of those properties, ideally? Because it will give the community a vision of where you're thinking. And I would think that's the purpose of the economic.
The vision of the Lunny property is an empty, vacant lot. I don't know if we have a conceptual plan of what we would like to see there. And in fact, that's where developers come in, and they have the vision. We can imagine what could go there, but whether it would be financially viable or there would be somebody out there is another story. And that's why when you have redevelopment projects and you have a redeveloper, they come in with the ideas, and they have the bottom line up here. And that's really what you need, the combination of our ability to make it happen and somebody come in with the vision.
Right, so any of the zoning changed in those areas, or they're zoned exactly what they had hoped?
What's this?
Right now, they're zoned what they have been, but what we did in the master plan, we identified them as potential redevelopment areas. So if someone came along to us and said, well, we're interested in this area, we'd be willing to want to work with you, the master plan gives us the ability to go in and look at the zoning specifically in that couple block area, whatever it is, and to amend the zoning to make something work that would make sense. For example, somebody mentioned earlier incubator businesses. We've looked at that specifically for the area that I showed you in Belford, by Railroad Avenue, those parallel streets from Main to Church Street. We specifically talked about it because there's actually a couple places in that are sort of like that now, but developing that whole area as kind of like startup, small incubator business type, mini warehouse type facilities. It's perfect for that because it's kind of what it is now. It doesn't generate a huge amount of traffic because that's always been a concern. Keep in mind, every one of these things that we talk about, someone's going to say, I don't want the traffic. Okay, someone who lives near there is going to say, okay, that sounds good, but I don't want the traffic on my street. So none of these are going to be a slam dunk, so we have to try to balance the various interests. And so we've looked at incubator business because they're not real high traffic generators, but they're good job generators and good taxpayers. So that's one area we've looked at that. On the one area where we have done some more conceptual planning is the Belford Seafood Co-op area. As I mentioned, we have that study. If you look on our website, it's on there. It shows the concept designs for how to redevelop that property. And that's one of the areas we have looked at possibly tying in an educational component. We've talked to Monmouth University about whether they'd be interested about possibly a satellite campus or a type of facility that might be coastal oriented or commercial, seashore commercial oriented type of facility because we'll be right there on the water. You got this active fishing industry right next door, so there's some good educational opportunities there. So we've tried to blend those two things on that site. But if you look at the plan, you'll see some pretty interesting little designs that we came up with as concepts.
Hey, Jerry.
Yeah, Jim.
I wondered if we could hear from other members of the committee their impressions after a year in economies they're seeing.
My name is Kevin Colangelo. I'm a 9-year resident. I'll start. I was just thinking of saying something about our little van trip. I don't know if we saw you, but I think the impressions are we all got in the van that night in September, and a lot of the questions that you've all asked and a lot of the things that the mayor has been talking about have been our discussions. So we come to this with no specific expertise. I'm not a local business owner. These folks are. Being an interested resident who plans to spend the next 30, 40 years here and getting to understand a little bit of the history. Tony and Jerry have been great kind of walking us through the history of these properties, and then going into a place like the Ideal Beach in the North Middletown area where I hadn't been before, and seeing these little neighborhoods remind me of the neighborhood growing up where I was, and saying, okay, how did it get this way? What could we conceive of to go in this area? And Tony just mentioned that other property in Belford. While we were in the van, you had the whole committee in 4 or 5 rows. It was a little comical in some sense, but we actually were going back and forth with just ideas. Just, we could do light industry, we could do this and that, and would this be good? Well, wait a minute, what about the traffic? So that's kind of, what we've been our discussions have sounded like. We're very positive and very focused on a lot of the big developments like the Sloan Kettering and the medical building that's going up on 35, and we're seeing that, bringing more people into town, and I think you asked about a marketing effort. That's something that we're also, if you kind of look at the original committee charge, talks about how we build up Middletown as a destination for businesses and people who want to shop in. The mayor's tax program, the real estate tax rebate program is going to be a great one because it'll encourage all of us to do our dry cleaning in town, do our banking in town, and things like that, which will have hopefully a ripple effect.
Thank you for asking. I agree with Kevin. My impressions after 1 year are it's a very good group. What I mean by that, it's a lively, it's an engaged group. This is not just strictly an advisory board, which, to be honest with you, I may have been a little worried about. Is it just something you put on your resume and you fill a seat? No, I learned that after one meeting that this group was vocal. This group had a lot of ideas. This group was passionate. And I think month after month we picked up a lot more steam. So I think to give you the feel of the room, I think with each month we get a little better, and we're certainly making progress. I think the other thing that should make you feel a little better is, remember we're all Middletown residents. My kids go to the art center, they dance with Miss Tina. My office is right next to the empty path mark, so I feel that pain just as much as you. I walk past it every morning. All right, I'm former president of our local Chamber of Commerce. I worked with Cliff Moore for years, so I have my beat on the local business community. I can understand what you mean by maybe frustrated or showing patience. It takes a little while for things to get going. And I agree, I've learned that, but there is a process, and I think you should feel comfort in the fact that we've started these processes. Like Jerry had said before, that first step is just filing that complaint. That gets the ball rolling. We can't control how long the ball has to roll, but we can certainly get it rolling, and I definitely feel we've gotten a lot of balls rolling over the past year. And then I think the other thing that should give you a lot of confidence, and certainly given me a lot of confidence after a year, is you think about the people who are on this committee. I mean, who better to answer the question, is Middletown a business-friendly community, than Mr. Saker? I mean, how many communities has he dealt with? He's a Middletown resident, he's a believer in our area, but he has a lot of experience with the county and the state.
Just so you know, Rich Saker owns about 35 ShopRites, and he owns a ShopRite here. And he's also a Middletown resident.
So these are the types of people who are speaking on our behalf. I think that's very important. Talk about Harold Nolan. Harold's forgotten more about economic development than I know. He's an amazing resource. I mean, so these are some of the people who are really working hard. So I think that should really also help you determine the field. I think the last thing that I want to that I've reminded myself this past year, and Jerry reminded us a couple of times tonight, it's about creating an environment, right? It's about creating a business-friendly environment. And fair or unfair, what I've learned that certain towns are labeled fair or unfair, business-friendly or not business-friendly, and you need to change that, you know, if you're committed to it. So I think over the past year, we've certainly went a long way to say, okay, how are we labeled? Is it true? And then what are we doing to change it?
My name is Pete Wilkins. I've been a resident of Middletown since 1978. My observations are very similar, so I won't repeat anything. I will try not to repeat anything. I think when we first had our first meeting, just what Patrick just said, it was pretty open-ended, and we were allowed to kind of frame how we wanted to proceed, and we talked about creating a business-friendly atmosphere in Middletown. And one of the things we got into right away was possibly looking at ordinances, and we got into some specifics and charged some things. A couple of things have come out in the last year from that initial premise or concept that I think, for me personally, is interesting. And what's most interesting is Middletown is so big. When we deal with issues, we're dealing on such a macro basis that it's almost difficult to get to a micro approach and deal with the specific. This meeting tonight, for example, we're basically, the Economic Development Committee is here to promote business. It's interesting that almost all the comments from the audience have been from residences, residential people, individual Middletown residents who are concerned about issues with their homes as it relates to Lunny's, with Ideal Beach and having it developed, with Lincroft, etc. I live in New Monmouth near Belford. My son lives in Belford. And for example, I think sometimes we get so caught up in the overview that we sometimes don't get the specifics. My personal goal is to try and hone in and accomplish individual things. Maybe it might not be maybe it might be trying to step up code enforcement to the residences around the Lunny area so that if a potential investor comes in, they are going to be more receptive to doing something. Or getting lifeguards back at Ideal Beach and developing a snack stand or something so that people are driving to the area. So I think my observation is that from our standpoint, gaining specific input and allowing us maybe to work we are really basically advisory, and work towards solving individual issues is something that's a goal of mine. And the website also, which I don't think yet has a mechanism for us to get input as an EDC on the website. I think that's on the drawing board, so that's another thing. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Do we have any other questions? Comments?
Yeah,
Yes.
I have a comment. I think Mr. Schneider, you had mentioned that you want to create sort of, business-friendly environment. I think another way you can create a friendly environment is by inviting those businesses into your meetings. Now, I made a suggestion to Dr. Scharfenberger earlier, and he chose not to respond. So I would like to know how the three of you gentlemen on the committee feel about inviting the public and business owners into your meetings. If they were to attend your meetings, would they be ushered out?
I appreciate your concern, and I know where you're coming from. I think the one thing that should give you comfort is that when I'm in that meeting, I'm in your shoes. You know, again, I can't stress enough that, you know, I live behind Sacred ShopRite. You know, my office is right in town. My kids are in the school district. I run my errands on Saturday, and I shop locally. So I would hope that when I'm in that meetings, I'm representing my town to the best. That's what I try to do to combat any concerns that you may have.
Let me just say one
I'm
thing.
sorry, but you didn't
We're just
answer
here
my
to
question.
have comment. We're taking all this input in. We're not going to, you know, roll
So
out.
the response is they would not be welcomed, in other words, if they were to.
Ma'am, that's not what he said. Now, we welcome your comment and we take it under advisement, and that's what we're here for. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I want to commend you. I said, this is the forum on where businesses can come and speak. So I like it when they're behind closed doors, there's 4 or 5 people that are discussing it without the input, so they focus on what they have plans to do, and then come to us as the public.
Well, they can do that. Typically,
and
at township
you know,
meetings, the public
the public
speaks
doesn't
only
belong.
at.
All right, listen, this is not a political debate here, okay? Let's keep this constructive and, yes, ma'am.
But, you know, I think it would be a great idea if, obviously not every month you guys need to formulate your own concepts, but every maybe quarter when you have something's perking or something's brewing and you feel that it would be a good opportunity to invite other businesses.
Sure, and
Say
you-
specific, like food vendors.
Sure.
You know, it can't be all across the board, but
Right, and Heather, these are the kind of things we would bring up at meetings and discuss how we want to proceed from there. That's the way you do it in an organized way. Anybody else have any questions?
okay.
Yeah, sure.
Just to go back to the Bay Shore, I believe that if you look at the county incentives in their program for spotting certain parts of the county, I think they're heavily looking into the Bay Shore.
I'm sorry, what?
I think they're looking at the Bay Shore to
Oh.
try to incorporate that, kind of get it up a little bit more as a center of focus of an activity and places to go. So I think you might want to sort of touch base and watch their program.
Yep. And you know what, Heather, we're very involved with the IBCA, and Heather, you're my witness that we have a lot of communication, so we use their input on what they would like to see in those areas. You know, we take that very much to heart, and they're a great resource for us. So, you know, anything we do or anything we propose, any vision that we may, you know, calculate for that area would be, you know, run through the prism of the folks there. We really want every neighborhood to develop and have the sort of business development that they want, not that, you know, somebody sitting in an office in the middle of town wants. So we really want to be respectful of every part of town, give them the opportunity to develop and have the sort of business climate or business activity that they feel best suits their neighborhood. And every neighborhood is a bit different. Certainly the Bay Shore has different assets than Lincroft and New Monmouth and all the different parts.
What I was trying to say is that the county is also, I think it'd be a good coordination.
Sure.
Because I think they're taking an active interest in trying to develop, you know, so that the visitors can come in and enjoy it and it's part of an active community.
Sure. Absolutely right, Heather. Somebody else have their hand up? Okay. Before we go, I just want to say, you know, before we close, I just want to say this. We have so much going on, good going on in town here. We have a tremendous start. I was remiss in not giving a shout out to our former mayor, Pam Brightbill, who's here. Just raise your hand, Pam, okay? So, and Pam, one of her initiatives early on was the Buy Middletown program. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's really one of the earliest sort of programs that we started to sort of enhance our business community here. And what it is, it's a free service where any business in town can register their business on our website. And this way, when folks come in and say, gee, I want a dry cleaners or I want a hair cutter that's in town, you can look up hair cutters and it'll give a list of all of them, their address, their hours. And it's really a great tool and it's completely free and the businesses really like it. Now the good news is, I've done, and I know former Mayor Fiore, between the two of us over the last 2 years, I've done a record number of ribbon cuttings for small businesses. And you've heard the well-worn cliche that small business is the backbone of this country. Absolutely true. So every time a small business comes in and takes one of those vacant sections of a shopping center, we all benefit. You know, there's jobs being created there, but there's certainly, you know, life in that area that was once vacant. So that's a great thing. And those small businesses benefit from the Buy Middletown program. Now, the state, as I mentioned before, the state and the county working together, the governor has done a tremendous job of turning the proverbial battleship around. And it's not an easy thing. New Jersey was rated one of the top 5 most improved states for business climate and business friendliness in a recent survey by a very respected journal. And that's something that really means a lot to us, because when people start to look at New Jersey as a whole as somewhere that, hey, things are changing there, maybe we want to consider opening up there, that's what helps the municipalities, because every one of those businesses, whether it's Google out in California or any of the West Coast, coming in, they're going to come into a municipality. And Sloan Kettering could have easily gone to the other side of the Delaware as it is here. So we're very proud to have them here. And with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for coming out. Stay tuned. Please read Middletown Matters. Check the website. We're going to keep everybody up to date on what's going on, and we have a lot of good things in the pipeline. So thank you very much. Get home safe. Okay?